started. Thank you for coming. I know that it's midterms and there's a lot going on, so I appreciate your attending this event, and I'm really excited. There's a lot to learn on how to create a resume and apply for jobs. So I am going to turn it over to our guest presenter, Dr. Kim McCracken, who is a UNH alum, of course, and she's with the USDA NCRS. So
NRCS.
NRCS. I apologize.
Oh, no worries.
I got it.
NARCS, you missed the story. We're the NARCS.
The NARCS. There they are. All right. So take it away.
Okay. Thank you so much for showing up in person. I know that it's a busy time for you, and I can tell that people are really busy right now because when I walked around campus, I saw no one. It's so nice outside, and everyone must have been inside studying. So what I'm going to talk about today is how to find a federal job. How many of you have ever even looked for a federal job before? Have you been on USA Jobs? Was it smooth sailing and really easy to figure out? Okay, because if you answered yes, I'd say you might as well go ahead, but it's pretty tricky. It's very different than applying for other jobs. I mean, once you get a job, it's a job, but it's set up in a different way because there are so many federal jobs and so many different agencies, and they try to make it pretty similar. Have you ever heard the saying, kind of same look and feel? So they try to make that hiring process pretty similar, and so we're just going to talk a little bit today about some of the things that will help you be successful if you're trying to navigate finding a federal job, submitting your materials, and not having it bounce back without them even looking at it. If you have questions at any time, I'll try to take those. If we get near the end and I have a few more slides, I might just say let's wrap it up. But if something is confusing, let me know. Okay, so I'm going to hit the highlights of the things that I think you need to know to get your foot in the door and then hopefully get that call for an interview. So we're going to talk about the resume. We're going to jobs. You know, how do you even find a federal job? Application process. What does it mean when they say the qualifications for a job? And then, you know, if you get lucky enough to land an interview, and then I had to limit it to a few common myths because when I Googled common myths for federal hiring, it was like 500 million hits. I mean, I broke the internet just trying to find that. So I just pulled a few that I hear when I talk to students. Okay, so how many of you have applied for a job outside of like a government job? So the purpose of that usually is you want somebody to say, that's a cool person. They would really fit in working with my team and my agency. I love their hobbies. I love all these different things. So you're really trying to sell yourself. You're trying to make them want to meet you so that you can have a great interview. With the government, completely different. They just want to know, are you qualified? And so it's really almost a job application. So when you go through this process, you have to think of it in a different way. So you're not trying to be like funny, entertaining, marketing in the same way that you are with like a 1 or 2 page resume for another job. There are very specific questions that they want you to answer, and you need to make sure that you answer those questions. And when it spits out, it's a nasty looking resume, but it gives that initial step to get through the process. Okay, so don't be fancy. Don't use all kinds of colored fonts and icons and everything. You really want to make sure that you use that federal builder. It's a resume builder. It used to be an actual job application. Use that form. But if you spend a lot of time here with career services and you have a really wonderful resume, you can include that too. So you can do this federal resume builder that has the stuff that gets you through the door. But if you really have a fantastic resume, I love to see those too. So don't feel like that effort has been wasted, but you have to have the other one. So think of that as like one of the big boxes that you have to check. Several people that I've hired in the last few years have given both their personal resume and then also that federal resume. So feel free to do that too. Okay, so we have jobs open sometimes for like a entry-level job out in the middle of nowhere. There'll be like 200 applicants. There are only so many people in the federal government to look through those. So just like the private sector, there will be instances where a computer might do the initial scan and then there's always a human that looks at them too. But so if a computer is comparing your application, your resume, and all your materials to a job description, they're looking for the same words, right? So how many of you have either written a paper or a resume and you start writing words and you're like, I keep using the same word, I'm going to go with the thesaurus. I do it all the time. You can do that, but make sure that you use the same words at some point during the process, because the computer's looking for the same words. And so if you don't do that, you may have the best resume with the fanciest words, but we may never see it. So covered that part. So I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about this part. So when you apply for a federal job, the computer might look at stuff, human resources might look at it. So human resources are people who classify positions, they review basic materials just to make sure that you check all the boxes. They have no idea about what a soil scientist like me would want, or what someone would want for computer science. So you have to almost translate your stuff. If you have courses on your transcript that have really interesting names to encourage students to take the class, but it's really a really super boring class that you just need to graduate, you have to have some kind of statement or a letter from the professor that says, this is really a soils class, or this is really a psychology class. So make sure that, and we'll talk a little bit more about the qualifications, but anything that wouldn't be absolutely clear to someone outside of your area of expertise, you want to make sure that you use plain language and explain it. So what I've recommended to a number of students is make a little Excel sheet, and if it says you are required to take these courses, list the course names next to that so that they know for sure that a common thing for the students that I hire is a soil conservationist, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. They need plant classes and soil classes. So I encourage them to put those on a spreadsheet and say, I have 40 credits of natural resources, I have 3 credits of soils, and 9 credits of plants. Here they are. So the course name, and if it's something like, let's say, anybody do EcoQuest, New Zealand? No one in this crowd, huh? So I've had other people that have done that, so you go away for a whole semester, and it's a mix of plants, soils, biology, but there's not one class that says soils or wildlife or plants. And so I've had to reach out to the instructors and actually the dean of COLSA to say, can you provide some justification that the student did actually have enough plants and soils credits? And so not everybody that's a hiring manager like I am is willing to help you do that. So you need to make sure that you do some of those things on the front end by yourself. So if it says you need this, make sure anybody would say, oh yeah, they have that. It's right here in this document. Any questions about that?
So you want us to put like what the actual course title is that you'll see on our transcript, but then we can put like in the second cell, like this is a soil science course or soil science.
Yep, and so in some cases, students have included the course description, or if it's a course that even then might not be clear to a human resources person, they've included a letter from their professor saying, you know, I know this course says hydrology, but it covers a wealth of soils information, and so I say that this is a soils class, and they're pretty good about accepting those credits.
What about a syllabus of the class?
A syllabus can work.
Yeah.
So if you have a syllabus, you know, after it's been like 20 years plus since you graduated, I don't have the syllabus anymore. So that makes it a little bit harder for me. But anything that you can get to basically document that you're telling the truth. Okay, so one of my favorite things is human resources. So again, we're using the soil example because I'm a soil scientist. The study of how soils form is called pedology, which sounds a lot like, you know, a podiatrist. So the HR person said, you know, I really can't understand why all these soil scientists were taking foot science courses. And so if you study something and it has a lot of jargon that not everybody understands, say pedology is the study of how soils form. So really basic stuff, because human resources people in the government have studied human resources. They have not studied biology, computer science, maybe they did psychology, but you need to make sure that you know that anybody can understand what you're saying. Okay, so here we are. This is where you find all the good stuff. It's called USA Jobs. It's where you find, it's the federal job search website. Has anybody ever received an email saying, pay $10 and you'll get this list of federal jobs sent to you? It's a pretty common scam. You do not ever have to pay for a list of federal jobs. You can go to www.usajobs.gov, G-O-V, wow, and you'll find the list for all the agencies. There are a few agencies that might do something a little different. They might have their own website in addition to USA Jobs, but the vast majority of government positions are advertised on USA Jobs. So we just say .jobs. We don't do the .com or .gov. So if you just Google USA Jobs, make sure that it looks something like this. It might change, and it will say it's the official government website for job listings. So it looks like that. If you scroll down on that same page, it's going to list a bunch of different things that are called, hiring paths. So they have different emphasis areas for different programs or different hiring preferences. And so for the most part, you are going to be looking for open to the general public. If you do have veterans preference or some veterans experience, you may want to click on that button. And then there are some opportunities here for students, so both internships, and there are some recent grad positions and a recent graduate position. And so these are frequently in the Pathways program. But recent grads, the benefit to that for students is that you're only competing with other people that have graduated within 2 years. So that eliminates a lot of competition. So if you can find a recent grad Pathways internship, it can easily turn into a full-time federal job, but you're not competing with everybody. So that's a huge win. So you'll see that with the hiring paths. Okay. There's so much guidance on how to use USA Jobs. I haven't used it. I haven't applied for a job since 2008, so it's been a little while. So I made myself a profile and I stepped through it to make this presentation, and the guidance is really clear. So instead of standing up here and telling you to all the steps, you can easily get on USA Jobs and step through all of how to set up your the resume builder to create your application and all the different documents. Do not wait until the day that you want to apply for a job to start doing USA Jobs. It's clunky. Sometimes it goes down. You need a bunch of documentation. You have to upload forms. You may need official transcripts. So I highly recommend that if you want a federal job, get on USA Jobs well before you're looking for a job and start building your information, and you develop a profile. You can save all that stuff, so when that dream job comes up, you're ready to roll. And then it's already saved. You don't have to go scramble and find things again. You can jump right on and get it. So you can start building it. You can have your draft, like a draft version of a resume. Maybe you're a double major, or you have a major and a minor, or you're interested in a couple different types of positions. You can have a few different types of resumes. So you always want your resume to be as similar to the job you're interested in as possible, and try to fine tune it. So if let's say you're a double major with library science and mycology, I don't know, I was just talking about mushrooms earlier, probably different resumes, right? just a thought there. So USA Jobs allows you to do that. So you can create them, save them, you can edit it without having to start all over again. And I've had people apply for jobs, and so they've clearly gone in and they have multiple resumes. So current employees applying for a job within my state, and they send me a resume that's 5 years old. I'm like, you do not live in Wisconsin. I know you live in New Hampshire. Why does your resume say you live in Wisconsin? So be careful if you use some of these, things where you can have stuff saved. You need to make sure that you upload the right version for each application. The other nice thing with USA Jobs, so you can save your information in there, But who has time to go in every single day and look for jobs? What you guys do, your students, you're looking for jobs. Oh no, you still need to know this. You can go in and set up filters, and you can have USDA jobs send you automatic emails for positions that meet your criteria. And it's really important to do that because some of the jobs aren't open for very long. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So who's actually looked at a federal position and all the language on it? A couple people? Some of them are like 10, 12 pages long, really detailed information about all the qualifications you need, little blurb about what the actual job is. Doesn't usually align that closely with what you're doing, but it's the standard language that we use. You have to read it. You have to read it again and have someone else read it too, and make sure that everything that they ask you to do, if there are transcripts, if you need anything for your military service, the application, a questionnaire, everything that they need, you have to include it. And so there's very detailed information. I remember the first few times I applied for a federal job, I got my highlighter out and I was highlighting stuff and putting check boxes next to it just to make sure that I included everything, because the first time I applied for a federal job, they bounced it back and said you didn't include all the stuff. We have also had very well qualified, amazing people that work in my office that applied for a promotion within my agency and sent in a form that wasn't signed. Oops, not even going to consider you. So I hate to make it sound so awful, but once you're in, you're in. But you really need to make sure that you have a partner with you, and whether that's career services, a trusted family member or a friend, don't try to do this alone. Like, try to make sure that someone has looked at your stuff. And if you submit 99% of what you need, no one is ever going to call you and say, "Hey, Bobby, sorry, I know it's a few days before this closes, but we need you to submit this other form." You will never get that call. There's no do-over. So they have hundreds of applicants. They're going to find someone that's good enough. So it's really up to you to make sure that you submit all the right stuff. And it's happened. I mean, look at me. I'm a federal employee. I think I've applied for 4 jobs, and other than that first one, been lucky so far. So, okay. Questions about that? I know I covered a lot so far. And then we'll cover this on, I have a little picture of an announcement. And so next to the job title, there'll be "this job is open to." You will see many jobs that are only open to current federal employees. Do not apply for a job if you're not a current federal employee. If it says that it's only open to current federal employees, they won't consider your application. So it's really important to look at that list of who they'll accept applications from. Okay, so here's the list. I know there's a whole bunch of information, and I think there's probably like 10 times more than this in the actual job announcement. So up at the top, over on the far left, it's a soil conservationist position. So that would be a common entry-level job for the agency I work for, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, where we help people help the land, private land conservation. Talks a little bit about, I know I'm moving, sorry. The overview, so it'll give you when it's open. So this is late January through early April. The pay scale and grade, so that's just, is it an entry-level job? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. A permanent job, there are many temporary jobs, seasonal jobs with the government, so it's all listed here. Competitive service, the salary, they give you a big range. Usually plan on starting at the low end. And there's not a lot of wiggle room. You can't negotiate in the same way that you could for a private company. Gives you the location in many cases. So if you click on this, it will actually show you where Danielson, Connecticut is located. Several announcements will have multiple locations, and there could be up to 100 locations listed. And it may say they're going to fill 1 position in each location, or it may say we're going to fill 2 jobs in these locations. So you need to read the details on that. Almost every position says it's telework eligible, but if you've been reading a fair amount of the federal news, they're really scaling back telework. So don't expect to have a government job where you're teleworking 40 hours a week. And who wants to do that anyway? It's good to, go be with your coworkers. So I guess that's just how I feel about it. And then there's a summary of the duties, which is what do you do in this job? And then we get over here to the requirements. So this is the part when you're looking through this and you're trying to figure out, am I qualified for this job? Read this part very closely. So the requirements or the qualifications, it's very detailed, and they really do expect that you're going to meet all these things. So this is the type of area like basic education requirements, a degree in a certain area. They might list 5 or 6 different topics. So for the soil conservationist, they're looking for natural resources, environmental science, biological sciences, and then certain courses. So, and this will be true if you're looking for a job in engineering, if you're looking for a job in a medical field with the government. They're trying to make sure that they're using federal money wisely to hire qualified people to serve citizens of the U.S. and of the entire world. So they do a lot of work on the front end. So that's what it looks like. I don't know if we have any veterans in here, but when I did the career panel in February, I had a number of questions about federal hiring for veterans. The U.S. government does as much as they can to make sure that we honor the service that veterans have given to the United States. And we offer a lot of positions with veterans preference. It's not every single position, but the vast majority of positions, we evaluate candidates from veterans first. If you're a service-disabled vet, and there's a bunch of interesting categories that I cannot memorize about, different lengths of service, different types of disabled service. If you are a sole survivor, if you were married to a veteran or have a veteran that was your parent that lost their life, there are some different things that that will benefit you. And so USA Jobs, and then this FedsHireVets.gov has a wealth of information about that. And so if you have served our country or you have a relative that has, I encourage you to look at this and see if there's some benefit to you. You're not going to find a more friendly place to work for veterans other than the federal government. So we have several folks. They're still they'll be gone for active duty. They'll be gone, doing a weekend of service. So a lot of smaller companies and private companies aren't able to support folks doing that. So if you are a veteran, I encourage you to check that out. And so this gives just a little sort of overview. So let's say I have a job open. I will get the vets first. I'll see in many cases the veterans before I'll see any other applications. And so it is a serious preference. Again, it's not for every single position, but if you are able to apply for veterans preference, I encourage you to consider the federal government. We just hired a great public affairs specialist who just got off active duty. He's kind of worried he might have to do it again, but we have folks with great skills that are transferable. Who knew that public affairs for the military would translate into public affairs for conservation? So keep in mind that you may not be doing exactly what the job talks about, but you have transferable skills. Okay, so different types of appointments. So basically, this is ways to get into the federal government. So an appointment is like a type of position. So basically, there's the standard announcement, and so the job that I just showed you, that soil conservationist job, is a standard announcement. It's open to the general public. It has veterans preference. So that's the standard job. The Pathways internships, recent grads and presidential fellows. Have any of you heard of a Pathways fellowship or internship? Okay. So this is a great way to get into federal service. So a Pathways internship, what they do is they hope that you'll work for them for at least one summer, possibly 2. If you work for about 640 hours, so it's like 16 weeks, and that could be during the school year, over the summer. And you do a bunch of online trainings about how to communicate in an office setting and a few other things. you could then directly after you graduate get a federal position without having to compete again. So the competing part came when you got the internship. Several new employees that we have with NRCS in New Hampshire and in other states were these Pathways interns. And so I have recently hired several UNH grads as Pathways interns. So that's a great way to get in. Talked a little bit about recent grads, and so it's another way to try to encourage new graduates to join federal service. So you get to apply for a job and only be competing with folks that have less than 2 years of college experience, or 2 years after graduating from college. So look for Pathways opportunities, and so that's not specific to my agency or to USDA. That is a government-wide program. So that's a really great way to get your foot in the door. We've also hired students to be Pathways summer interns, and then it's like, oh, our office in Dover and Epping and Concord are pretty close to some of these local universities. So students have actually worked for us during the school year too, and they are pretty well-paid internships. If we send you more than 50 miles away from where you live, we also give a pretty sizable housing stipend too. So I think for this summer, it's $800 a month to find a place to rent. So that's not too bad. Yeah, living up in Conway, got a great summer student working up there. And then direct hire. So this is one that we don't always have access to, but basically we need so many people in some types of government positions that they just post it there, they keep it open for a long time, and people keep applying. And so instead of waiting for the closing date of that announcement, they just batch up applications and send them sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly. And so for the first two up there, HR looks at that information before I would get it. But we usually have so many people applying for direct hire, human resources, they're like, we're not doing this. They send everything to the hiring manager first. So it's a little bit different setup, but we just had 3 direct hire positions in New Hampshire NRCS, 2 engineering positions and a soil conservationist position that we filled all of them. But there are several direct hire positions open now on USA jobs. And the thing that's nice about them is that they're open for a longer period of time. The kind up on the top may only be open for 5 days. So that's why you want that auto email to get to you. But with this direct hire, so you're getting close to graduation. I mean, so if you're not a senior, then don't listen to what I'm saying right now. But you can apply right now, and they can tentatively hire you. And then once you pass all your classes, you graduate, then you could get a final job offer. So it's a little bit different process, but we have a little more flexibility with that. But there are several positions on USA Jobs right now for direct hire. So it's kind of a nice way to just keep a job open, have applications keep rolling in. So check those out. We talked a little bit about the qualifications. Don't put a lot of effort into applying for a job that you're not qualified for. Unlike many private sector jobs where you might be able to smooth your way into it and have somebody say, okay, so this student doesn't have all those things, but it's so close, and I like these other things, and they work for the similar company. In the federal government, if it says you have to have a degree in a certain topic, or you have to take a certain class, or you have to have 5 years of experience, there's really no wiggle room. And they do that, to be fair and consistent. So there are good reasons to do that. So just keep that in mind. And it's up to you to make the case that you are qualified, and you have to have the documentation to prove it. But it happens. I got in, right? And then we talked a little bit about some positions listing specific degrees and courses. There's a lot of emphasis on the education piece because it's easier to compare a bachelor's degree from anywhere than it is to say a couple years of experience working somewhere. So there are positions that have a blend of education and experience. But even though that's listed, many agencies will just want to see that degree. Not saying that's a good thing, but that is real. And so the position that I showed you earlier talked a little bit about, it said that it was a 579 soil con position. And so to me, that's a jargon that I hear all the time, so I know exactly what that means. So I just want to talk a little bit about what this means. So many federal jobs are GS, general schedule jobs, and that just gives you an idea about the level. Is it an entry-level job? Do you need a PhD for it? And so you can know sort of what grade level to target. And so if you are looking at jobs that are listed as 2, 3, and 4, those are jobs primarily for students. So maybe you have a 2-year degree, or you're a current student, you're looking for a summer temporary position or an internship, look for those GS 2, 3, and 4. Once you graduate, you're eligible for a GS5 position. So 5 usually is a certain number of years of experience or a bachelor's degree. And if you are a person who has done a pretty good job studying, school's great for you, you have a GPA somewhere between 3.0 and 3.6, look at the job announcement, because in many cases, you could be eligible to start as a 7. So with each of these grade numbers, your pay goes up. So if you have the opportunity to start out as a GS7 instead of a 5, that's a raise for life, you know? So you're starting at a higher level, so that's a great thing to do. And if you have a master's degree, you can start as a 9. If you have a year of grad school, you can start as a 7. And so the way this works with the federal system is you spend 1 year at one of those grades, and then you're eligible to get a promotion to the next grade if you applied for a job that lists that next grade. So it's a interesting system, but it really aims to be fair and consistent. And so every person in the same location that's a GS5 in their first year, they're paid the same thing. So there are definite upsides to the way it works. Okay, this is a tricky one. So I've been on a number of career panels, and I've heard some things about the questionnaire. So, right? Anybody heard anything about the questionnaire and job applications for federal service? Okay. So basically, everybody that gets their foot in the door with the resume, you've used the application or the resume builder, you get through the door, you have the degree, you only submit references that love you, right? You have the transcripts. How do we compare one person to another? We ask them to rate themselves, right? And so that's really what the questionnaire is. And so it will give you somewhere between, I think it's like 10 and 80 questions. Usually with my agency, it's about 20 questions. And so the first few questions are just going to ask you again, do you have a bachelor's degree in this field? And so the first few are kind of easy. And then it's going to give you a number of situations or things that will ask you if you know anything about it, if you're an expert. Maybe you do some legal or some environmental compliance work, and they want to know what's your experience with the National Environmental Policy Act. So if you just graduated, it's going to be really hard for you to say that you're an expert in it, but people do it. So what I'm going to tell you is, if you don't rate yourself highly, we're never going to see your application. But if you lie, you're going to get fired, right? So it's really a delicate balance. So you need to look at the questions, and you need to be as honest as possible and give yourself the benefit of the doubt. And so if you're kind of hemming and hawing between, do I know about it? Can I do it? Can I do it independently? Can I train others? Am I a national expert? Give yourself the benefit of the doubt and write some notes down about why you selected that. So if I'm interviewing you and I say, gee, tell me about how you're a national expert in this thing. You don't want to be going like, ooh, what is that? You want to do something defensible. So maybe you're not an expert in that exact thing, but you can do something very similar. And so if I ask you that question, you say, well, you know, I know the National Environmental Policy Act is very similar to this. I'm not exactly an expert in that, but I know that I can learn quickly and I have transferable skills. So that's a believable answer. But don't lie. I have had really fantastic people that I hired they looked back at their application materials and found out that maybe they weren't exactly truthful, and I had to fire them. I've also followed up on some questions during interviews, and when someone says that they're, you know, an expert in something and they just graduated, and I ask a little bit of information about it, and they're really stumbling for an answer and can't come up with anything even related to say, it looks pretty bad for you. So pay attention to this questionnaire. I've heard some people say, just go through and rate yourself as high as possible. You want to sleep at night, right? You know, lying isn't really worth it. But look at those questions. If you're interested in a position with a certain agency, you can go in and look at those questionnaires well before you would have to apply for a job, so maybe you have an opportunity to get the experience that they're looking for. And that would really be the biggest win. Did I scare you about that yet?
How do you access the questionnaires before you apply?
You kind of have to go through
You,
the
pretend you're
process.
applying
Yeah,
and
you have to go through the
it's
process
like
and look at it.
Okay.
And they do change. So, you know, there might be 40 soil conservationist positions open across the country, and they may have different questionnaires based on the part of the country, or if they're looking for a certain skill set. Okay, submit your application. So we've talked about USA Jobs, but what do you do once you have an application? You basically submit it through USA Jobs. It will bump you over to another software program, but you basically submit it through the website. Make sure that so if you're applying for 2 environmental engineering jobs, make sure that you read those announcements closely, because they may not ask for the exact same things, especially if they're with different agencies. So make sure that you read it, because they could be a little bit different from one to the other. And you don't want to miss any steps or documents. And you might want to just, if you're uploading something, make sure that you open it, especially if you have multiple copies of your resume. You can check your status of your application on USA Jobs. And this is, you know, some other part that has given me heartburn more times than I care to mention over the last few years. So you apply for a job, you can get in and you can look at your status, and it will say received, or it might say not referred to the hiring manager. Just because it says it's not referred to the hiring manager doesn't mean that at some point it couldn't be referred to the hiring manager. So what happens is you apply for jobs, that first round of applications go to the hiring manager, and so that might be all of the veterans. So if you're not a veteran, your application might say not referred to the hiring manager, but it doesn't say yet. It just says not referred. And then if I didn't find anybody that I like, they dig deeper, and then I found out all of those people went and found other jobs because they thought that we were no longer considering their application. So don't lose hope if it says not referred to the hiring manager. It doesn't mean that it's over. I'm not sure what it says when it's over, but you know, don't give up hope at this point. And many times this lags weeks, months behind the actual status, and I have zero control over that. Did I mention I don't work in HR? I'm a hiring manager, so I supervise people and that supervise other people, and so I do a lot of hiring. And so a lot of this is my personal experience, and being on the other side, trying to get wonderful students like you into my agency. I've learned a lot of tips and tricks. So let's say you built that awesome resume, you pulled together your application packet, and you get a call for an interview. Or you don't, you just get a job offer. That happens too. So that was the first thing that happened to me. You apply for this job. I'm like, oh, that's great. Can you tell me more about it? Well, you applied for it. Don't you want it? Real story. That was my first interview for the federal government after interviewing for 4 days for college professor positions. So I do a serious interview because when I'm hiring someone, I think of it as like a lifetime commitment. I really try to hire the best people that fit my team, and I want to make them happy because I do not want to hire again. I want the right person, I want to keep you. But there are a lot of federal jobs where they don't interview people at all. They just look at your stuff, maybe they call your references, and then they just pick you. So you may not have that opportunity, But who would want to work for someone that didn't interview them? You know, make sure that it's a good fit for you too. So that's my personal experience. Big federal agency, we can't have everybody come in for a personal interview. I do most of my interviews for entry-level positions on the phone. It's kind of awkward, but we've hired some fantastic people with phone interviews. I always tweak my questions, ask some interesting stuff. So you never know how it's going to go. There's no requirement for an interview. There's no standard format. So any practice that you can get doing an interview, I would say follow the same advice that you get for other positions. And it's an opportunity. Maybe you don't come across that well on paper, but you have a fantastic personality. It's a great way to do that.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Do hiring managers interview, or do HR people interview, or both, depending on the position?
So in my agency, I'm the hiring manager, and I do the interviewing with the direct supervisor.
Okay.
So a lot of times I'll fill positions in our field offices, and so that supervisor will be part of it because that's the person that has to live with that person. But I want to make sure we get the right person. But there are times that we've included human resources on some of those interview panels. And we frequently, if we're hiring a higher level position, we'll have several different people from our team from different parts of the agency do the interviewing because we get some more interesting questions. We get different perspectives, and it's nice to have a few people. Rarely do we just have one person do an interview, but we do take that pretty seriously. But you know, sometimes we do that. And then don't be upset if you do this fantastic interview, it's amazing, and they don't offer you a job. As a hiring manager, I can never offer you a job. I can say, you were fantastic, I thought you were amazing, I would so love for you to work for us, I'm gonna select you for the position, but I can't offer you the job. So basically, it's true. So basically what happens is HR has looked at the stuff initially. I say, I like you, I want you to work with me, but they do another quality assurance step to make sure that we haven't missed someone else that was qualified. And then they double check some of your stuff, maybe like your transcripts. And then they would issue the next step, which is the job offer. So the timelines vary widely. I've had people apply for a job and get a job offer the same day. I have also had people apply for jobs last September, and I'm still waiting for a final job offer. Varies widely, and it depends on the workload of the HR person, the background checks, all kinds of stuff. So typically what happens is, let's say you had an interview, someone selects you, that information goes to human resources, they do the little background check. Human resources, they would be the people that would officially issue a tentative job offer. How reassuring is that? It's tentative. We're not sure. We think we like you, but we're not sure. So basically what happens with this tentative job offer is that they go through, and if you need a security clearance, we do fingerprints for everybody right now. They double check your transcripts. This is where we do all that vetting of that information. Lie on your questionnaire, we might find out at this point. It's awful to go through all of this, get the tentative job offer, and then lose the job because you lied on your stuff. Don't do it. Just don't do it. So let's say everything turned out just fine and dandy, then you get the final job offer, and then they just negotiate a time with you. They do so much hiring in the federal government, things get lost in the shuffle. If you're just not sure where you are in the process, I do encourage you to figure out who the contact is in the advertisement, but that might be a human resources person 10 states away. So if you know that you're applying for a job, let's say with USDA, NRCS in New Hampshire, look up the information on the website. Every government agency has a website. If you reach out to anybody in that main office, they're going to connect you with the right person. And so I might not be able to give you any more satisfying information, but we do take notes, and we might be able to call and find out, hey, we had this job open 6 months ago. What's up with that? You always have to be in control of your destiny. So always follow up, ask questions. Did I miss that? And just advocate for yourself. Okay, here we are. Common myths. These are some of my favorite ones that I've heard. I'll talk about them a little bit. My resume should only be 1 page long. That's great for the private sector. With this USA resume builder, fill in all the information. If you have, if you've been working for 40 years, maybe focus on the stuff you've done in the last decade. I don't see a lot of people here that have been working for 40 years and have like a 50-page resume. So it's totally fine to have a resume that's 3, 5, even 10 pages long. For federal service. Don't do it in the private sector. I don't want to give you bad information. Hiring managers, I'm just going to give them my resume and they can transfer that into the Fed speak, right? I'm great. I got a straight A's. I've had all these internships. They can look me up on, what's that, LinkedIn? They're not going to do that. They are going to look at the stuff that they say they're going to look at, and if you don't feed it up in exactly the format they ask for, they're never going to see your stuff. I made my federal resume in USA Jobs. Now I'm all set. I'm looking for 10 different kinds of jobs. Set it, forget it, just hit that button. I have had so many resumes and job applications submitted to me where it's like, I prefer to work in Bakersfield, California. Well, great, I'm not going to pick you. You know? Or so one thing I didn't mention much is cover letters. It's good to have a cover letter. Sometimes the hiring managers don't send them. If you are going to do a cover letter, have it actually mention the job that you're applying for. Don't have it say that you're interested in working for the Forest Service in Bakersfield, California, if you're applying for a job for me. It does happen. They're not going to translate stuff for you. Just like any other job, try to target your information to the specific job that you want. I love reading cover letters and resumes that really speak to the job that I'm hiring for. It's like that person has 50 jobs they can apply for, and they want my job. They love living in New Hampshire. They talk about the White Mountains. They talk about growing up on the seacoast. I know my resume isn't great, but I'll win them over with my interviewing skills, right? Are you ever going to get an interview if you don't have a resume to get you through the front door? No. So you need to work on both sets of those things. You might not even get an interview. And then I hear this one a lot after I do some of this talking about federal hiring. Ugh, why do I even bother? I'm never going to get a federal job. Because fantastic people like me have done it. And I've hired so many great students from UNH and other parts of the country. It's a great way to, if you care about our country, you care about our future, working for the government is really a great way to go.